Welcome to the Sunmall podcast, where we interview the stars of e-commerce. So today we have Risha Rohera of Silk and Sonder. So Risha, first question is maybe you can talk a little bit more about your background and how you got into the world of e-commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rohan, for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Risha. I'm currently a business strategy analyst at Silk and Sonder. And just to quickly summarize what Silk and Sonder is, we're essentially a holistic health brand, and that's the overarching theme. But what we specialize in is basically having these physical monthly subscription wellness journals, as well as a digital app, and combined, those are like a monthly subscription that we offer to our users. And it's all infused with CBT and positive psychology. So it's really trying to get people to move from somewhere where they're stuck in life to somewhere where they can really thrive. And that's what we really try to do with our products. But there's a lot more about Silk and Sonder that I can get into later. But quick background on me, how I ended up here. Started off my career at McKinsey and worked at a business as a business analyst out of the LA office. So did a lot of just like tech strategy, growth strategy case studies simply because I was on the West Coast and that was serendipitous. Just because I'm from LA. So it was a lot of flying from LA to San Jose every week before the pandemic. But I just felt really excited by the tech ecosystem. I never really touched it at all because none of my family members worked in tech. So I was like, oh, what is this new frontier that I've really not been exposed to? So from McKinsey, the logical next step for me was entering tech in some fashion. And I think you see a lot of consultants just going into business operations. So that was the logical next step for me. Ended up at LinkedIn, worked in product business operations for a year. And so got a lot of the really nice introduction to tech where I was getting to hone my like SQL skills, getting to understand like what even is product management and how am I supporting that in a business operations role? Because I really had no knowledge of how tech companies worked. So got my feet wet there. And then I thought, okay, understand tech now. I understand what the different roles and functions are. Now I want to go somewhere that's an early stage place where I can really contribute as many of my talents as I can to the company that I'm working for. And got to Silk and Sonder serendipitously. My friend sent it over LinkedIn to me and she said, this looks like something that really resonates with your background. And she knew I was looking for something that's earlier stage and something related to wellness and women's wellness. So serendipitously got in there. But I had all these amazing like data analytics skills that I got from LinkedIn and McKinsey. And so I think what was really cool is Silk and Sonder was in this stage. They'd been around for about four-ish years now. And they were really thinking about, okay, we've gotten to product market fit with these journals. How are we thinking about leveling up and continuing to grow? And so the combination of my business strategy skills, my analytics skills, they were almost able to carve out a role for me that really honed in on my skill set to help them grow. So it really was like a almost like a product market fit equation for the company and the company candidate fit. So it's kind of how I got here.
That's awesome. Oh, you were at McKinsey, learned some strategy, and then LinkedIn really helped you hone in the technical skills. And so by the time the opportunity at Silk and Sonder was there, you had the kind of complete package of skills that would really help Silk and Sonder grow. So maybe you can talk a little more about like what does BizOps mean? What do you actually do? What do you spend most of your time
Yeah,
on?
yeah. That's a great question. And I think BizOps comes off as a very nebulous role that I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley are still like, what are those people really doing? Because it can encompass a lot of different things. And it means a lot of different things depending on what stage of the company you're at. I guess I'll think of it in a few different buckets. I think you have on one end of the spectrum, you have LinkedIn and Google, right? They're the behemoths of the tech industry. LinkedIn was, I believe, one of the first companies to have their own business operations function. So they really pioneered the path. What does business operations mean in a traditional sense? And so at LinkedIn, business operations is essentially you're a part of you're aligned to a certain product or a certain like marketing or sales function, and you're really thinking about strategy and analytics tied to that function. I was tied to like the LinkedIn pages function. So it's really thinking about how do we get more company admins to come onto LinkedIn and to start using LinkedIn as an organic channel for marketing. And so my role was very tailored around, doing the sizings, thinking about the impact of certain features that we would launch and stack ranking that, thinking strategically about who are our end customers, like what is the target market size. So it was very data analytics focused with of course that strategic thinking mindset that I needed to bring in from consulting. And then on the other hand of the spectrum, you have BizOps at like early stage startups, which is where I'm at now. And I'd say there's an element that is similar, but I also think it is very different. I'd say the similarity is that you are still using data analytics to power the business in a really particular way. Like you're really trying to say, okay, we have this wealth of data. How are we going to use it to make better experiences for our customers and just continue to grow in the long term? But in addition to that, when you're BizOps at an early stage startup, I think it's really about being like the utility player for the startup. You come in and you just have to be flexible and think about, okay, what needs does my startup have? Is it in growth marketing? Is there a gap there? How can I help fill in there? Or is it business development that I need to fill in there before we have to hire someone and build out and incubate that function? So I'd say it's a mix of, I think you have the strategy, the data analytics, and it's a lot of like analysis there, but you also have to take in this new lens and be like, how can I actually just get on the ground and execute? And I think it's a little bit difficult to sometimes switch between that because you're used to doing all these like in-depth analyses and getting things perfect. But then here you're like, how do I really do this in an 80/20 way? And then not only do the analysis, but do simple things like let me just send out like 100 emails to people to get on the phone with them to think about partnerships. So it's really, you're flexing a lot of different skill sets when you're a BizOps at an early stage startup.
There's a lot less resources at the startup, so you have to be a utility player or do the 80/20 things to maximize the time.
Exactly.
So one of the things you mentioned is like you also have to manage kind of strategy, make sure you guys are doing the right thing. How do you think about strategy? Any kind of frameworks you use to help following
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'm involved with a lot of the high level strategic decisions for the company. So each quarter, it's basically me and the CEO sitting down and saying, okay, we want to get to this revenue target by the end of the year. Because we're like a VC backed business. So growth is uber important. And I know there's a lot of changing dynamics there, whether it's growth being the main goal or whether it's profitability now. There's a lot of different perspectives on that now, especially with VCs deploying less capital into the ecosystem. But ultimately, like we are still focused heavily on growth. So I think it's helpful to think about it across a few different dimensions and it's unique to every company, right? Like you have companies that are focused on solely like product led growth. You have other companies that are more of like sales led growth. I think what's unique about Silicon Sonder is that we have a lot of different opportunities for growth. So, for example, on the product side, we have a mobile app subscription that we just launched out. So, it's for those novice journal users who may not want to commit to all physical journal products, but maybe want to get journaling prompts on their app and then think about it or write it in their like notes app of their iPhone. So, we rolled out that product and that's the growth strategy there is really just like how do we get to product market fit and think about how do we target those users to meet them where they're at. So that's like one lever for growth. I think on the next hand, we're thinking about go to market growth strategies. So on that side, we're primarily D2C business. And I think with Facebook ads, with what happened with the privacy issues and such, like that led to Facebook ads being uber expensive, insane customer acquisition costs. So it's really thinking about, okay, how are we going to diversify our channels? Because a lot of e-commerce companies have fallen into this trap of we're dependent on Facebook ads to grow. It's getting really hard to scale with just that as your primary platform. So what we're thinking about now is like one of our core customers are teachers. So how do we meet teachers where they're at? Are there partnerships that we can do with schools to get them to fund Silk and Sonder for their teachers, whether it's like a mobile app or like a physical journal? So that's like a go-to-market strategy that we're thinking about for growth. And then I think thirdly, it's helpful to think about like sales strategy. How are we going to just empower our customers to almost be salespeople for our brand, right? Because there are people within every e-commerce company who are gung ho about the product. So a natural lever to pull there is like, how do we get the people who are most excited about our product because they really believe that it's helped them tremendously to tell more people about it? And how do you leverage like community led growth essentially? So I guess the framework that we think about is I think about it personally as like product strategies, go to market strategies, sales strategies, but it really differs. I think it's ultimately about like you have your current customers, how are you going to increase revenue from them? You have new customers, how are you going to get new customers and increase revenue from them? You can have new product lines. There's a lot of different things and I think it's just thinking about what are my company's like unique strengths and how can I leverage that for growth? And then thinking about the framework.
So try to identify the top level metrics
Yeah.
like growth or profitability, and then really focusing, segmenting the customer base, existing customers, new customers. So throughout the conversation, you mentioned that being data driven is very helpful. So when you're like looking at growth and what are some of the key metrics you look at?
Yeah, key metrics. So track a lot of the metrics, but I'd say the key ones are the top line ones are going to be, of course, revenue, just overall revenue week over week. Then you also want to look at revenue from new customers because we're subscription based, so we get that recurring revenue each month. But of course, we want to ensure that we're growing past that. So it's like, what's our revenue from new customers? And then, of course, you want to keep a pulse on cash burn. If you're VC backed, that's of course just important to know in your back pocket at all times. And then one thing I also like to track is just cancellations because you essentially want to make sure if you're tracking your new subscriptions, you also want to make sure, even if your cancellations are, say, like a month out from when they actually churn, you want to make sure that you're not net positive there. I think that's just super important to make sure that you're continuing to grow. And then, especially for e-commerce businesses, you want to look at the growth metrics of customer acquisition cost. You want to look at your payback period and be like, how quickly are we paying off that customer acquisition cost? Because ideally, you want to keep that but below 3 months or less. And then also like your 12-month LTV to see at worst case scenario, what is the highest CAC that we can tolerate if we want to continue to grow? Because you want the LTV lifetime value to CAC ratio to be 3 to 1. I think that's just like very important to keep a pulse on at all times. And that just ensures your unit economics are stable and how you can continue to grow relatively profitably too.
And how are you looking at these metrics? Do you have like dashboards? Do you look at it and what kind of
Yeah.
cadence do you evaluate these metrics?
So my founder actually recommended this book to me. It's called Traction. And it recommends this concept of a company scorecard. So it's essentially as simple as like a Google Doc, right? And you just write down the key metrics that you want to track each week. So I basically look at it on a weekly basis every Monday. And I'll go in and we have it's linked to a few different sources. So we look at Looker, where we have a lot of our Shopify and recharge data coming in. I also look at Google Analytics for some of those growth metrics. And then I'd say those are the two key places that we're getting the data from, but I have it all consolidated into a scorecard format. And then from there, it's really thinking about, okay, I have all the numbers like sitting in front of me from all these disparate sources. How can I like create the story about like what's happening? Or if needed, it's the conversion rate is down for this week. That's leading to a higher customer acquisition cost because we're seeing fewer people convert down funnel. Is it something on our website that we need to fix? Is it like a new offer that we just put in place? So it's really thinking of, okay, I have the numbers in place, but like, how does it all tie together?
That totally makes sense. You look into it every week, see if there's kind of some anomalies or things that have changed, and then really try to do some root cause analysis
Exactly.
here. Are there any kind of ways or resources? So I think you mentioned I think it was called Traction. Any other kind of books or resources, courses for people if they're interested in upskilling?
Yeah, especially for data analytics. It's a good question. So I feel like data analytics can encompass so many different things. I think one part of it is like what monthly metrics and key like weekly metrics are you tracking? And for that skill set, it's really thinking about how do the numbers tie together on a high level. And I'd say trying to think of the best way to upskill in that sense. I really think it is. helpful. Like if you're just a business analyst or a biz ops function, something that is a more like catch-all function at a startup, I think the key is really to just to talk to other people in the business. Like you want to know what marketing people have rolled out in the past week, that if there's a bump in revenue from emails, for example, you want to be able to say, what email campaign did you roll out? What was the offer given there? So that you can put two and two together and be like, okay, we saw revenue from our paid channels, Facebook, for example, come down, but we launched this amazing offer over email. So that's something that we should keep in the back of our minds. So I'd say the first thing is talk to other people at the startup and understand what's going on. That helps you create a picture in your head as to what's moving the numbers. And I think that just comes with a couple months of a startup, then you understand the flow of things. And then secondly, for SQL specifically, if you want to get good at that, I personally, my first exposure was through Khan Academy, their free course. I think it's really easy to learn based on the way Khan Academy presents it. So I think that's like a very great first step. But I think it's really just about once you have that foundation, just doing practice problems. And I really think it's learning by doing, honestly, and being okay with not knowing how the code works or why you're stuck, and then bubbling it up to some of the experts, whether that's like a close friend or a mentor outside your company, or we work with consultants, and one of our consultants is really amazing at data analytics. So if I ever have questions about like my code and why I'm getting stuck, I can always go to him for help. So I feel like for me, I think the best thing to do is just learning by doing, leveraging your relationships to help you out where you can.
Learning by doing, I think, is pretty much the best way to learn for a
Yeah.
lot of things. Using, if you get stuck, ask for help. And then the final thing is it's not about just SQL or the tools or the dashboard. It's having the business
Yeah.
context to really understand, okay, this metric move. And then how do you think this kind of role evolves in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the beauty of BizOps, business strategy roles that are catch-alls for everything is that you can go into so many different routes in the future. I think a lot of people who come in from consulting into startups like want to be future founders or future top level leaders within companies. And I think what's cool about this role is that you have access to the whole organization. You understand how everything ties together. So it's, oh, if you want to be a founder, you can go be a founder. If you want to head up operations, and you can go do that. If you want to dabble in growth marketing and think about what really moves the needle there, you can move into that. I think you can really move in anywhere. And I think also the beauty of this role is that if I wanted to go into product management, I can really lean into product and learn more about how to create those engaging features and really prove myself in that area. So I think it is helpful to have a bit of intentionality as to what do you want to get out of this role so that you're able to tailor it to what you want. But yeah, I think I went into it and I came into it as like exploratory and without being really set on any path. And I think I'm still figuring out what kind of is the next step, but there is beauty in knowing that no doors are closed. But yeah, I think there's no right answer for how the role will evolve, but there's just so many different directions it can go into.
Makes sense. So BizOps, you can do a lot of
Yeah.
everything, so it really opens the door. And then also, you can try to spend more of your time on specific areas you're interested in, so that if you want to target those roles in the
Mhm.
future, you're positioned in a good
Yeah.
way. So for the next part, I really wanted to dig into Silk and Sonder. So I think you mentioned this before. You guys have the physical product, but then you guys also have the digital product. So how do you guys think about building that out? Some difficulties having both, offering just the digital or the physical that
Yeah. So I'd say the kind of core value of the company is that you have the physical product, but you also have what we have in the digital app that's really sticking with our customers is we have a community essentially around. Oh, it could be like we have specific journaling prompts that might be like, what brought you delight this month? And so our community will go in and chat with each other about this is what I wrote down. And it's very supportive. And it really gives that almost insulation against loneliness when you're in this like healing journey or when you're stuck in life. And so that's why the physical and digital work really, really well for our members. I think it encompasses everything that you could be facing, and it provides the solid support that you need and accountability for you to achieve those results. So with that, I'd say some challenges are I think it's we haven't faced any major challenges since I've been here. I'm sure there were challenges in getting it up off the ground, but because it's already established, it's thinking about I'd say like one thing that we would are running into like the just digital product is how do you make it as compelling of an experience when so much of our community is based off of like the physical product, right? So if people are talking about like a journal prompt in the physical journal on the community, and someone's coming in fresh with just the digital subscription, like how do you make it as exciting of an experience for them as well? So from that, it's thinking about, okay, in the future, do we want to build like micro communities? That's something the founders really advocated for creating almost like interest-based groups so that there's a spot for everyone who comes in, even just digitally into the ecosystem and versus just like the physical journal. So I think it's about creating compelling argument now for just the digital subscription because we do have users who, even if they're not on the app, they just use the physical journal and they're getting a ton of value out of it. It's a subscription and they're very happy with where it's at. But how do we create that same almost like single product, like single half of the Silk and Sonder ecosystem? How do we make that as compelling for like a digital first user and thinking about that? And I think another challenge that comes with that is the target market is a little bit different. I think for digital first users, we do see that it might be a lot of Gen Z users who really didn't grow up with pen to paper. Like they've had their iPhones since they were born, essentially. It's a whole other equation and understanding like what fits and what doesn't with those kinds of consumers.
And so how do you blend a person who might is using a slightly different
Mhm.
product and then also might have a slightly from Gen Z, how do you blend those communities together? Speaking of community, how do you guys foster that community? Like, do you guys incentivize people? Do you guys have a moderator? Any kind of tips on fostering the community?
Yeah, I think that's something that Silk and Sonder has been able to do so well that I haven't seen in a lot of other companies. And I really, from what I understand, is it used to be a Facebook group essentially, and then it was getting so much traction that we moved this community into the app. And so it almost was like by accident that this community came out of into existence and became such like a bustling and important part of Silk and Sonder. And there was no sort of incentive or anything to get these people in. It was just about creating a space for people to talk about their struggles and creating like a brand that made it feel like they really feel heard and cared about. I think it's almost part of Silk and Saunders' magic is that it doesn't feel like, hey, we're like trying to sell you something aggressively. It's really about, hey, we want to provide you with value and coming from like a values first perspective. And that automatically will engage like the consumer in a way that they're excited to engage with the brand, excited to engage with other brand users. So I think it's almost like infusing authenticity into the brand. And I think our founder Meha is a super active part of the community, right? And so she'll pop into like the community and share a little bit about what she's going through from time to time. And I think that especially at the beginning when you want your consumers to really, really trust your brand and understand what's what the ethos of it is, it's important to have the founder coming in and sharing their authentic views. I'd say that's really the key, like connecting with your users on a person first basis removes the need for an incentive, like a monetary incentive or anything to get people to come in. And then from there, I think it's like an organic flywheel effect. The more, once you have 10 users, it's easier to scale to 100 users within a community. And from there, it just organically increases.
Makes sense. So the community came organically, but then also having the founder really be engaged and really have like authentic content help jumpstart the community
Exactly.
there. One of the things I think you mentioned is you guys send out, like, prompts every month or
Yeah.
every week. So how do you guys come up with these things?
Yeah. So we come up with the content like a year in advance, actually. And we do have like external agencies that help with some of the meditations that we put together, but a lot of it is, at least it was born out of like the founder's own experiences and what worked for her. And from there, like it's really a community or a team effort in terms of figuring out like what content's going to resonate with the users. Like we'll have like recipes that we come up with that we'll put in every journal. And what's cool about Silk and Saunders that each month's journal is like a different theme. So for May, it's going to be like delight. And then for the next month, it'll be something else. And so we've had like for February, it's passion. So it's really about just tailoring journal prompts related to those themes. And it's done like a year in advance. And yeah, I guess I'm not super involved with the content side of things, but that's all the color I have there. But it's really cool because I feel like our prompts really resonate with our consumer, and it makes it more than just we have those planner style pages in the Silk and Sonder journal, but it motivates you to go step beyond and be like infuses that positive psychology mindset of okay, you set up your week. Now let's think about things that bring you actual joy and take you to that next level. So yeah, it's always coming from like a positive psychology lens and thinking about how to take yourself to like the next level.
Makes sense. That's also really impressive that you guys, do stuff a year in
Yeah.
advance. And the next thing I wanted to move on to is different kind of tactics you do to drive demand. So, and one thing I noticed is you guys have like a really prominent gift card section on your site. I think it's like the first tab or
Yeah.
second tab. So what is the rationale there?
Yeah. I think for gift cards, it's more about just we hear about people wanting to gift silk and sonder to their friends because it's helped them so much. And so it's really just providing them another avenue to gift it. Like we had a Mother's Day sale and we had like gift cards available. And I think it's really just about okay, if a consumer wants this and it helps like our revenue, like top line, that's something that we should create. And that's something that's like low lift and brings money in through the door. And especially at a time when you want to continue growing and we're facing all these like ecosystem headwinds of so many, just the economy is going through it. And especially after the pandemic,
Yeah.
where you see a lot of the discretionary spend on like health and wellness. Like, for example, Peloton was super big during the pandemic. And
Yeah.
then, you know, what happened. So I think it's about just thinking about what does the customer want and finding an easy way to meet that need. They want to tell their friends about Silk and Sonder, give them an easy way to gift it. And I believe we did have opportunities to gift just like the product directly, but it sounded like the gift cards were a better avenue for doing that. So that's the simple strategy behind it, really.
Makes sense. The people wanted to help their friends out, give it to their friends. Gift card was the best channel, and then also it helps you get free money, new
Exactly.
customers, especially in this economy. I think almost every D2C brand's been
Yeah.
hurt. One other question is, so I think you mentioned a couple like Facebook ads with the iOS update don't perform as well. Do you guys find any other kind of channel for ads that are good, like TikTok, I don't know, Pinterest, Snapchat, any other channels that kind of work well for you?
Yeah. So I think the tricky thing is that Facebook ads is still king of all ad platforms. And
For sure. Yeah.
even with rising customer acquisition costs, it's really important for most of your spend to really be allocated to Facebook ads. We do have a presence on TikTok a bit, and especially for getting app downloads and such, we do use TikTok more for that. And then, of course, just Google non branded search, the typical spend there. In terms of other channels, we've tinkered with a few in the past. I believe we've touched Pinterest in the past, but it just hasn't been as well performing as Facebook. So I think, especially with you're tied into Facebook, Instagram, it's thinking about what are those other alternative channels, like the non DTC channels, like schools and such. That is like really important to build out. But and I think there are so many different growth tactics that can be employed to make Facebook ads more efficient. So we just hired like a new head of growth who has like a ton of experience worked with different marketing channels. And I think what's cool is she really comes in with how are we going to leverage like our organic and our paid and really create this like almost omni-channel presence to really get our product out to customers. So it's also not only thinking about paid, but how do you leverage the highest number of conversions from your organic channels? And we have a bustling TikTok page and Instagram page. How are we getting more conversions organically through that? And then, of course, like email and SMS are like extremely helpful when you have your like potential new customer list built out and you can get conversions from there. So I really think it is about just optimizing your marketing function and being like, how do we make everything work together? And on one side of the spectrum, like I said, you have the partnerships, big non D2C partnerships. On the other side, you have email. On the other side, you have Facebook ads and all the tweaks there. So a lot of different things. And just thinking about holistically is probably the best way to go.
Makes sense. So you have, for ad channels, Facebook's still the main one, but exploring the other ones. Also the partnerships, what's unique to your business, the schools, or teachers for you guys. And then also your existing customer, making sure you engage them with email and
That's
SMS. And then just wrap up questions here. Kind of your big focus or top of mind for you for the next 3 to 6 months.
yeah. I'd say big focus is focusing on retention, honestly, for our business. I think, especially as we go into the summer months, I think every consumer brand, unless you're a swimsuits brand, is going to see a downtick in sales. And so, if we want to sustain like the growth that we have, a lot of it is going to just be on, okay, we have a lot of customers within our ecosystem. How do we just retain them and reduce churn? Because that's what we really have control of, more control over than trying to fight the higher customer acquisition costs. So it's not forgetting about customer acquisition and all the hacks and strategies that we have there, but also thinking about okay, what kind of users, and especially for me, it's thinking about who are our current users, and we have so many attributes and so much data on them to understand what they want and what features they might want us to build. So it's thinking about okay, what's going to be really important to our customers is most of our segment like are majority of them moms? If so, like what do they need during the summer and how can we provide that with them either through journal prompts or new features within the app, things like that, like a different micro community for the to chat with each other, and thinking about it from that lens. But yeah, I'd say it's really focused on retaining our customers because I think that's probably going to be the biggest lever to pull when acquisition costs are through the roof over the summer.
That totally makes sense. Really focusing on retention with acquisition cost rising. And I think you had a great point about they use your product, right? You have a lot of data, and you should be able to understand them and come up with some strategies to help them
Exactly.
more. And then final question is more of a fun question. Any kind of brand you bought from recently that you were really happy with or you were excited about?
Yeah. I'd say something that we talk a lot about with my team members is we love Olipop. We think their
Okay.
strategy is just incredible. They really pivoted after the Facebook ads iOS update, and you see them literally everywhere. Like I see them at my gym. I would see them at like the LinkedIn office when I worked there. Used they really pivoted in such a way that helped them grow tremendously. And I think what I really like is that they're also a CPG brand that focuses on data and insights quite a bit. So it's like they are thinking like one step ahead of the game. I think data and insights has often been like a role just pigeonholed just to tech companies. But when you infuse that into e-commerce companies and think about how can this help superpower our growth, I think it can do wonders. And I think that's their omni-channel strategy is just something that is so admirable. It's really incredible what they've done with their brand.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sun Mall Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe.